We're gonna bring in our Christmas movie expert, John Hoven, the mayor, for his opinion. John, do you have a strong opinion on Christmas music or movies?
No, I don't. I guess if I just get vacation, I'm good to go. So I think that
Oh,
falls
there you go.
1990. So yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know the Mariah Carey song you're talking about. Sorry.
Yes,
I,
you do. There is
you can't have you may not realize that it's her, but you cannot have lived in
Mr.
America.
Music right here too. Like you literally know everything about music ever, and you don't know this Mariah Carey song. Jesse, can you
If
sing
you
it
were
for
like
him?
quoting songs off the Bad Religion Christmas album, then maybe I would. But Mariah Carey, I don't know. It just doesn't. Sorry.
Jesse, sing a few bars.
If we weren't live, I would attempt it, but nobody wants to hear me sing. What they really want to hear is about the World Junior Championship, because we don't have an NHL season yet, and so coming up is going to be the first opportunity since the NHL playoff bubble for Kings fans, at least, to get a real good look at some of the Kings prospects. John, before we dive into the WJC, though, I know that you are doing a bracket for the best reverse retro jerseys. You've got some jerseys behind you. So where do we stand in the fan voting on who had the best reverse retro jersey?
Well, yeah, just on the jerseys behind me, Jesse, I see everybody doing their Skypes and whatnot in front of bookcases. And so I was trying to be a little bit different. And I saw, Mario Lemieux was flexing, doing it in front of all of his trophies. I was going to put up, best sports blog trophy from a number of years ago, but I thought that was too much of a flex for, today's visit. So I went jerseys. Since you and I were talking retro jerseys the other day, we're getting down into the final four. This is the Reverse Retro Cup. Thank you for plugging it on mayorsmanor.com. The fans are voting, and the idea behind it was simple. Enough of all the media people ranking their opinions. Nobody wants to hear my opinion on a jersey, so let's hear what the fans have to say. And the fans are voting. So right now, of course, you have the Kings and Colorado, the Whalers. Those are some of the leading candidates. I just don't know how the Minnesota Wild have made it this far, because that jersey is terrible, in my opinion.
I think, look, I went to Long Beach Poly High School. The colors are green and gold, and I'm always stunned. I was never a huge fan of them, but I'm always stunned out in the wild, when, no pun intended for the Minnesota Wild, but I'm always surprised when I see those colors out in the wild how much people like them. So I have a feeling it has something to do with that, but I could be wrong.
Do you have a favorite, John? If you couldn't pick the Kings jersey as your number one, do you have a favorite overall?
It's funny because when the jerseys first started leaking and when they were announced, I kind of was leaning a certain way. And more recently now, I really like the Washington Capitals jersey. It's growing on me quite a bit.
Washington Capitals. Interesting.
Yeah.
Not my favorite, but hey, like you said, nobody wants to hear what the media has to say about it. Let's talk about the World Junior Championship. John, you said, I don't know, it was 2 months ago or something, you tweeted out that the Kings might have the possibility of sending 11 players. It doesn't feel like it'll wind up being 11, but I really wouldn't be surprised if it's 9 again.
Yeah, the 11 was, sort of a hope and a prayer with a couple of those guys. You have like Markkanen, for example. Finland has not announced their roster yet. They're the last holdout. They'll be announcing tomorrow, from what we understand. So right now you have 9 guys that have already been announced. Then, you'll get 2 more potentially on Finland, 1 at least. But Markkanen would be kind of slotted as the 4th goalie in their camp. So, depending upon what happens during camp, he might be included. He certainly is not projected to be the starter for that group, but all of the other players look pretty strong in terms of their ability to make the team or the confidence level we have in them making their respective teams. Outside of maybe Grans, I'm hearing he's probably about 50-50, and that's really just because that Sweden team is so deep.
So let's go through the teams. We've got Slovakia with Martin Chromiak. Chromiak was one of those guys where I was surprised that people were surprised where he wound up being drafted. I think it was the 5th round, if I'm not mistaken. Slovakia being in this tournament, they've got to be an underdog of an underdog, right?
Well, I'm surprised that you're surprised that Slovakia is an underdog in the tournament. Slovakia is one of those teams that comes in a lot like Switzerland, where every year they seem to pull off a couple of wins and sort of cause some havoc for some people. So they certainly are not among the bigger name teams, whether you're talking about U.S., Canada, Sweden, Russia, of course, which is probably had the most experience with this group. They sent their U20 team to their team to one of the tournaments over there recently, but. He's, I would say, probably a lock to make that team. And, they're going to have their hands full, especially this year of all the years. When you look at the players that will be available for all of the different countries, Slovakia, Switzerland. Those are teams that are going to be up against it, especially when you look at, the other teams that are in the bracket with them.
Next up, we've got the Czech Republic and a goalie. And Carlin and I were texting yesterday. John, you and I were texting about this. This is Lukáš Pařík. Carlin, does that sound?
We're setting up
like what he said to you when he said his name?
Listen, okay. So we've been arguing about how to pronounce his last name for so long. And Jesse actually does a lot of research. He talks to a lot of people. He gets a lot of opinions. He listens to translations on things. He looks up letters that don't exist in the English alphabet and tries to figure out how to pronounce them. And I was saying Parik because any sort of English speaking announcer that I've heard say his name in a video, that is how it is said. I have met him and filmed with him last year when the guys were over here and skating, and he introduced himself as Lukáš Pařík, but I have heard him say it while speaking his native language, and it does sound the way that Jesse is saying it. So I think he says it to people who are English speaking in a more Americanized kind of way, and then when it's all about Czech, it's just straight up how you said it, Jesse. Say it one more time.
Lukáš Pařík.
Yeah.
Stumbled over the airs there.
You got it. So, Hoven, I'm curious to know how you say it, and if you say it like Parík, or I don't even want to try the other one. I can't even Pařík. I can't.
Close enough.
Yep.
Well, when he was drafted, the day he was drafted, his agent told me that it's Parík, and then the player told me that it's Parík, and later told me it's Parík. So I don't know. I just know this. He is the #1 rated Kings goaltender in terms of their pipeline of goalies, right? Cal Peterson has already graduated from a prospect into being an NHL player. So now you start looking at guys like Jacob Ingham and on down the line. But I know we're talking about World Juniors. So he's the #1 rated prospect in the Kings pipeline. And he snuck into a couple of games last year. He was not the #1 goaltender for his team going into the tournament last year, but he was able to get into a couple of games due to some injuries and other sort of rotational reasons. And we expect Parík or whatever you want to call him. We do expect the young goaltender to get some games in, a number of games, and probably be the #1 goaltender for that group this year, which is pretty exciting. He's playing his hockey, for those that don't know, stateside, playing in the WHL once that season gets up and running here after the first of the year.
I'm always sort of fascinated at the World Juniors is sort of like the NCAA March Madness, right? A really good performance can sort of make a guy's career. A guy can dine out on it in the league for 10, 15 years sometimes. People will still say, well, that guy had an amazing, World Juniors back in whatever, 1998. But with goalies, it's a bit of goalies are a bit of a mystery to begin with, but such a short format and going up against so many incredible shooters. I mean, what would be the best case scenario in your mind, John, for a performance from Lukáš?
Well, first of all, you want to keep the goals against down.
Yeah.
Sure. Like you said, you're going up against, really, it's an all-star tournament. And for those that really aren't familiar with the tournament, you're missing out. This is by far and away the best tournament on the planet when it comes to hockey. It's not the Olympics. It's not the World Cup. It is the World Junior Championships, because you're getting players that are about to become NHL stars, and you're getting the best of the best. And it's happening at a time period where all of the best players pretty much are available that are under 20. So it being a best on best tournament, the best that you could hope for from a goaltender perspective is that he gets into a couple of meaningful games and he's able to keep the goals against down. And what I say by meaningful games is all of these teams, or most of these teams, carry 3 goaltenders, and they go into a rotation because you're playing many back-to-back games, especially in the round robin portion of the tournament. So it's somewhat the luck of the draw, right? So if he gets a game against a lower seeded team and he has a great game, then it gives people an excuse to dismiss his performance and say, well, yeah, but he was playing Switzerland or, Belarus or Germany or something. No disrespect meant to those teams. They're just not the powerhouse teams like the US and Canada or, Sweden or Finland. So you want to go into one of those sort of marquee games and you want to be able to have a strong performance. If you can win, that's great. But even if you're not able to pick up the W because you don't get the offensive support from the rest of the group, you as an individual have a, statistically sound game. And that's probably the best thing that he can hope for. But I'm sure that if we were to talk to him, he's hoping to advance out of the round robin and get into the medal part of the tournament, which is the second week just there after the first of the year.
Next up, we've got Finland. And, based on what you're saying, Markkanen's a long shot. But Simon Tavola, based on what you said, sounds like you expect him to make the roster.
Again, we can talk about names. Is it Tavel or Tyvel? It just depends how you, potato. But yeah, from everything. And of course, I've been checking in with all my sources here over the last couple of weeks as we get closer to, the tournament. And everybody seems to believe that he is all but a lock on the team. And you're going to need that sort of firepower. You're going to need that offensive explosion if you're part of that group and you want to make noise. Because again, you're one of the lower seeded teams coming in. But hey, they've had a strong tournament, that Czech group, and it wouldn't surprise me if they make some more noise this year again.
Based on the schedule, I think Kings fans could be, forgiven for maybe ducking out of Finland's games. They play, looks like Germany, Switzerland, and I know there's another game in Slovakia there. So maybe if Chromiak makes that team. But that brings us then into the sort of big three. When it comes to Sweden, we've got Tobias Bjornfoot and Helge Grans. Listen, Bjornfoot, I think at this point, expectations are he makes the NHL sooner rather than later. Helge Grans, still a question mark as to whether or not he makes it. Second round pick, so obviously the hope is high. But how much attention will you be paying to Sweden in this tournament?
Yeah, just a quick step back. I jumped teams on you there a moment ago. Didn't realize we were on Finland. Finland is one of those teams that it's amazing how good they are considering the population of that country. And I would have to consider them to be one of the medal favorites again. People have been sleeping on them for the last couple of years, and yet all they've done is gone out and earned medals at all of these different tournaments. So don't sleep on Finland. But back to Sweden, Grans is a little bit on the younger side. It's a deep team. He has had the stomach flu, as we've reported recently, so he did miss a couple of games. He's also played up and down this year, so that's impacted his playing time and the minutes that are available. In terms of Bjornfoot, yeah, he's expected to come into the NHL this year and split time with Cale Clegg on the NHL roster, that is. So both of those two guys will alternate throughout the year, probably getting about a half a season each. And that's just because of waivers and other things. It has nothing to do with Bjornfoot's talent. He certainly is penciled in as a top 4 defenseman in Los Angeles for many, many years to come, potentially even alongside Drew Doughty, who we know lobbied hard to keep him up on the NHL roster last year. Bjornfoot's expected to wear a letter as well for Team Sweden, so this should really be a big coming out party for him. He was part of the group last year. He's played on a number of teams for Sweden. He's worn a letter a number of times. Last year he didn't because he was one of the younger guys on the team, but this year he takes on more of a leadership role. He could even potentially wear the captain his letter on his jersey, so he'll certainly have a letter sewn onto that jersey when Sweden gets going here in a couple of weeks.
Now, I'm going to backtrack. I would say people have been sleeping on Finland for a couple decades. If you go back and look at their Wikipedia page, international tournaments, every time they're, it may be a bronze, but they're medaling every time they go out there. They have that defense first and great goaltending.
One thing I love about Christian Ruutu, one of the LA Kings scouts, is, you're supposed to be objective and you're not supposed to cheer when you're in the press box. But one thing about Roots, when you're in an international tournament and you're sitting near him and Finland is on the ice, you damn well know that who he's pulling for, because he makes sure that everybody around him is aware of what's going on. He's a big supporter of what's going on with his home country, and he has a lot to be proud of, as you mentioned, Jesse. All they do is just sort of seem to show up in the medal round every year and walk away with something around their neck.
If you go back and look at the location of the tournaments for the last, 35, 40 years, every time it's played in Europe or very near Europe, you can count on Sweden and Finland to wind up on that medal podium. And then, of course, when it's in North America, you get a big performance out of the States. We're going to move to my team, Canada. And listen, I know everybody watching this will probably be rooting for Team USA, but with Quentin Byfield on Team Canada, I expect a lot of Kings fans to be paying a lot of attention to Team Canada's games.
Look, if you're a hockey fan in North America, you always want to pay attention to Team Canada, regardless of of if there are Kings prospects on that group or not, because nearly every player on that team is going to end up in the National Hockey League. So that's the league's future stars. And while they might not be Kings draft picks today, they certainly could be players that one day would be acquired and would be in Los Angeles, or they're going to be on the opposition. The Ducks have some prospects on all these different teams, that are in the tournament as well. So even if you just want to get your Duck hate on, you can follow along, with these different groups. So from a Team Canada perspective, yeah, Quinton Byfield's a lock. He's expected to play a big role, a top 6 role, probably center the second line for Team Canada. And this could be, to use that coming out phrase, this is going to be a real big one for him. He was one of the youngest players on the team last year, had sort of a supporting role. But this time around, after being the number 2 overall pick by Los Angeles, he's somebody who's certainly expected to drive a lot of the offense and produce a lot for that group, not only offensively, but also to be able to shut things down defensively and really provide some defensive support to some of their bottom 6 players as well. On the defensive side, Jordan Spence, he's probably 50-50 in terms of making that team, certainly taking nothing away from Spence. He was Rookie of the Year, his first year in the queue, and then went on to become the Defenseman of the Year. So a lot of praise is warranted for that Quebec League blue liner. But, again, you're talking about a deep, deep Canadian team, and we'll have to see if he ends up making the club or not.
Spence is one of those players where, he's undersized, I suppose, technically. But I remember when he was drafted, all the talk was about how he can handle adversity, may be too strong a word, but how he can handle unexpected situations, let's say, whether it's moving as a kid or, joining new leagues all the time. He joins a crowd of right shooting defensemen, and we'll get to one more when we get to Team USA. But 5 seasons from now, 6 seasons from now, I think it's going to be really interesting to see who's on the right side of the Kings blue line.
He is a player that people should not be sleeping on. He is certainly a rising prospect. We've been beating the drum of Mikey Anderson for the last 3 years. I think now everybody understands, how important he is to the organization. And next on that list is Cole Holtz, not necessarily relevant from a World Junior perspective, but just to sort of draw some comparisons. Cole Holtz is somebody that not a lot of Kings fans paid attention to when he was at Penn State. And all of a sudden, Jesse and Carlin, in 12 months from now, we'll be talking a lot about Cole Holtz because he's going to have a breakout year for the Ontario Reign. Coming right behind that is going to be Jordan Spence. So if he does make the Team Canada roster, I think that'll certainly elevate his stock and people will start to understand who he is. And a lot of people don't really follow the Quebec League either. So the OHL gets a lot of run as a Canadian Junior League. The WHL probably gets the second most, and the Quebec League, outside of their little circle of cities, is kind of lost upon most hockey fans. That's really deep down, on their list of following. But Jordan Spence is a legit player and a rising prospect in the LA Kings organization. And so whether he makes the club or not is immaterial in terms of making Team Canada. It's really immaterial to the big picture. I think you're right, Jesse. Don't talk about Jordan Spence right now. Talk about where he's going to be in just a couple of years from now. And the Kings really have an up-and-coming defenseman who plays a game that will fit in nice to what they call the new NHL.
Sticking with the theme of right shot defensemen, we had Helge Grans in Sweden. We got Jordan Spence for Team Canada. And now we're going to get to Team USA. We're going to start off with Brock Faber, big boy, Minnesota Gopher, right shot defenseman. Does he make Team USA or is he too young?
I think he absolutely makes Team USA. He's one of 2 right shots that were invited to the tournament. I just spoke with Team USA GM John Van Beesbrook the other day, and he was speaking glowingly about Brock Faber. And for anybody who's been watching the early start here to the college hockey season over the last couple of weeks, nobody seems to have taken college hockey with as big of a storm as Brock Faber. This kid has come out on a team that is now 4-0. They'll be on TV today and tomorrow, so you can watch them. Look it up on your cable stations and watch on Fox Sports North. But I'm telling you, Brock Faber is the real deal. And the Kings look to have really picked up a solid player defensively with one of their second-round picks this year. Brock Faber is paired at the University of Minnesota with Ryan Johnson, who was a first-round draft pick from the Buffalo Sabres. Of course, he's also Craig Johnson's son. Craig Johnson is set to be the assistant coach in Ontario this year, former LA King, for those that might be, newer fans. But those two are having an outstanding season as the second pairing for Minnesota. And in talking to Van Beesbrook, it sounds like they plan on putting those two together. And that's a really smart move. You're talking about a tournament that's really being put together quickly these teams are being put together quickly heading into the tournament. There's already some chemistry that's developed between Faber and Johnson. So why mess with something that's already working? Those two have looked phenomenal for the Golden Gophers. Put them out there again for Team USA. I think Brock Faber absolutely makes the team on defense, and that'll give the Kings 3 players on Team USA.
That brings us to the 2 players that we mentioned yet for Team USA, Arthur Kaliev and Alex Turcotte, 2 players that I think everybody hopes and expects to see in a Kings jersey sooner rather than later. But last season, a lot of the talk was that the deployment that the coaching staff for Team USA used was questionable, let's say, when it came to some of the higher skilled players, not just Kings prospects, but also guys like Trevor Zegras and the rest of the roster. With a year come and gone and players moving on, do we expect to see Kaliev and Turcotte used in the higher profile moments?
Absolutely. And again, referencing that conversation with Van Beesbrook, he talked over and over about the fact that you have guys like Zegras, but you also have Turcotte and Kaliev, who are returning guys who are coming back. So last year, as first-year members on that club, there are other older players, and it's just a natural tendency, especially when you're younger and you don't carry that same level of confidence that you do as you mature in your years and your experience. It's natural to defer to some of those older, more experienced players, guys that have been there before. There's a lot of pressure on you as well when you're playing in an international tournament and you're putting on a jersey like a Team USA jersey. Now that Turcotte and Kaliev have already been through that, they have that experience under their belt. Now they're able to leverage that this year into much larger roles. They come in with more confidence as well. But I would agree with you. If you want to nitpick the Team USA performance last year, I think you should have played Kaliev more. When he was out there, he was productive. He didn't get the ice time that he probably should have. But that's water under the bridge at this point. You get Turcotte, who brings that speed game and plays the way that Van Beesbrook and Team USA, what they want at the tournament. So they're really high on Turcotte. And then Kaliev, I mean, the guy can just bury things. But don't forget that Arthur Kaliev is a great passer. We've talked about this a lot in the past, on our own program, Jesse. And Arthur Kaliev's passing is completely underrated. And in talking with Nelson Emerson of the LA Kings, he pointed out Brett Hull, one of the greatest goal scorers of all time. One of the things that Nelson Emerson remembers most about Brett Hull is his ability to pass the puck. And I think you're seeing the same thing with Arthur Kaliev. Everybody's going to end up talking about all the pucks that he puts in the net and all those goals that he buries, especially on the power play. But don't forget that Arthur Kaliev can also thread one through and set up his teammates.
Kaliev was one of those players where when he was drafted, you start doing the research and you hear all of the sort of, well, he's really good at this, but he could be better at X, Y, Z, whatever. And I'd go and I'd watch the clips and I'd go, I don't know, his defense looks great. His passing looks great. His work ethic looks great. I don't get it. I never understood the Kaliev slander. Obviously I'm biased, but we're going to go through the schedule here real quick. Christmas Day, we've got USA versus Russia. Scale of 1 to 10. Carlin, I know your husband, also a huge hockey fan. Will you guys be watching that game on Christmas Day?
Sure, gonna try. Yeah, we're not doing much else. We're all stuck at home still.
Fair
so
enough.
absolutely.
John, is USA versus Russia still a thing?
You know what? I've had the pleasure of seeing Team USA play Russia at a number of international tournaments, including at the Olympics, in Salt Lake, and in Vancouver, as well as at the World Cup. I have to tell you, Jesse, there is nothing like a USA-Russia game when you're there live. The intensity is still there. Probably, of course, the only thing that can top it is when Team USA plays Team Canada. Probably nothing better than when USA beat Canada at the Olympics in the preliminary tournament. Dustin Brown will tell you all about that back at 2010 up in Vancouver. Look, when the World Juniors are on, I don't care if it's Belarus against Kazakhstan. When the World Junior Tournament is on, it's time to tune everything out, get off of Twitter, and sit down in front of the TV. It's really disappointing. Personally, Jesse, I was planning on being at the tournament this year. Had such a thrill attending so many of these World Juniors through the years, including the outdoor game in Buffalo a number of years ago between the U.S. and Canada. Mikey Anderson was in that game. And it would have been nice to be up there in Edmonton and in Red Deer this year, taking in the games live. But if you can't be there, then the next best thing is to watch it on TV, maybe with a cup of hot cocoa.
Boxing Day, December 26th, we've got Canada versus Germany and U.S. versus Austria. So no disrespect to Germany and Austria, but hopefully an opportunity to watch some Kings prospects do some damage. The next day, we've got Canada versus Slovakia. That should be interesting. Monday, the 28th, Sweden, Austria, Germany, Slovakia. The next big game on the schedule, I think, is USA versus Sweden. That's New Year's Eve, and we could possibly see 5 Kings prospects with Bjornfoot and Grans on defense for Sweden and Turcotte and Kaliev up front for USA. That could be a really interesting matchup.
You know, New Year's Eve is typically when the big games are, and that date has usually been reserved for the U.S. versus Canada. But this year it happens to be the U.S. versus Sweden, which is absolutely an important game. When you look at Team Sweden, they are unbelievable in the preliminary games in the round robin portion. There's something like 400-0 in their last 400 games. They haven't lost a game, I think, in the preliminary round since maybe the 1800s. So Sweden and the U.S., that's going to obviously be a big game. And we'll have to see, you know, heading into that, the implications, because those early games, it's all about the implications of where you fall in the playoff round. And of course, Team USA, like any team, wants to get as many points as possible, so they get the quote unquote favorable matchups in the medal round. But I think if you're an LA Kings fan, or even if you're a USA fan, what you're really hoping for is for things to line up for USA to play Canada at some point. That can't take place in the round robin. It only can take place in the medal round. So we'll have to see how things shake out there right after Christmas.
The medal round starts Saturday, January 2nd. They play on the 2nd, the 4th, and the 5th. And what a better way to start off 2021, get 2020 out of our mouths with a USA-Canada gold medal game. That'd be incredible.
Yeah, that would absolutely be outstanding. But look, it's going to be a great 2 weeks. And so, you know, Bettman has not returned my text messages over the last couple of weeks, but I have been heavily lobbying. Forget the start of the NHL season on January. Let's start the NHL no earlier than January 7th. Let all of hockey, the entire world, let them watch the World Junior Tournament. There's plenty of time for the NHL after January 6th or 7th.
Yeah, the World Junior, I mean, it does sort of get overshadowed when you have the regular season going on along with it. But as I said, if you have a strong tournament, you can dine out on it forever. Akil Thomas, you know, hopefully he comes into the league and is great for the Kings. But if for whatever reason he's not, there will be a GM in the league somewhere that remembers that goal and will give him a contract just based on it.
Hey, Jesse, I'll tell you what. I know Carl loves the breaking news, so I'm going to give you a scoop here. I'm going to give you some breaking news now that you mentioned Akil Thomas. So Akil Thomas and Aiden Dudas, they've been over there playing in Germany for the Berlin Ice Bears, and they're coming home. So Alex Turcotte has already come home. Jacob Ingham came home recently because he's playing over in the ECHL with the Swamp Rabbits. It's a fantastic name. But some breaking news here over just about the last hour or so. It looks like Turcotte and Dudas, from what I've been told, they're going to be coming home. The original plan was for them to play 2 more games over there. Unfortunately, the Berlin team had a little bit of a COVID scare, and so they've had some games postponed. They were actually supposed to play this morning with another game on Saturday. A couple days ago, those games were moved to Saturday and Tuesday, but it looks like now the Kings are going to go ahead and just bring Akil Thomas. Of course, as you mentioned, he scored the golden goal for Team Canada. And yeah, there's going to be GMs out there. They're going to be willing to take a gamble on Akil Thomas for a long time. I just don't see it playing out that way, Jesse. He's going to start the year with the Ontario Reign. He's going to have a fantastic season, I believe, this year in the American Hockey League. And I think you could potentially even see Akil Thomas get a brief call-up at the end of the year. But be looking for Akil Thomas to be on the LA Kings and to become a fan favorite. He is a fascinating individual, a great guy to talk to, and a very, very talented hockey player who can play at center or can play out on the wing.
You mentioned the Swamp Rabbits. Their training camp opened this week. Their first preseason game on the 5th against the Stingrays. I mentioned that because I've actually been to a Stingrays game. As I said, my father lives out in South Carolina, so I probably won't be able to take in any Swamp Rabbits games this season. But the ECHL shut down like, I don't know, 60% of its season. I mean, there's only a handful of teams playing. It's going to be really interesting to see what kind of competition Jacob Ingham faces.
Yeah, for sure. You know, Ingham's a first-year pro. He had a great season, a great career in the Ontario Hockey League. He played for 2 teams, finished up his career with the Kitchener Rangers, battled an injury there in the middle of the year, but really had a strong showing last year. He's a rising prospect. Back to those goaltending prospect rankings that we talked about earlier when we were talking about Lucas Perique. It's almost a 1A and a 1B situation. Ingham has a little bit of a leg up on him in terms of the fact that he's turning pro, or he's already pro. He's going to have his first professional season this year. But in talking with goaltending coaches and whatnot, they really like the overall game of Jacob Ingham. Again, another kid with a great backstory, started a charity in terms of giving blood and doing things after a tragedy, that happened with and his family. So Kings fans will get to see Jacob Ingham in Ontario probably next year. This year, of course, Matt Villalta will be the starting goaltender, and then they signed a veteran backup behind him. So Ingham could potentially, if he has a strong run in the ECHL, he might get an opportunity to come up for a game or two, in the AHL. But everything's up in the air right now, as both of you guys know. The schedule is changing on a daily basis for all of these leagues, so we'll have to see. So, Jesse, from what I understand, then you're going to be streaming those Swamp Rabbits games to watch Ingham playing in those ECHL contests.
I mean, like Harlan said, I'm not going anywhere. I don't know. I don't know if ECHL has an ECHL TV the way AHL does, but yeah, I'd watch a Swamp Rabbits game. Absolutely. I look, John, minor league hockey's great. It's a ton of fun. Hey,
if I'm going to watch an ECHL game, as long as they're playing Jason Christie, former coach of the Ontario Reign, everybody loves Smurf, one of the most entertaining characters of all time. I still get text messages from him. Just heard from him about a week or so ago. Just a great guy, a funny guy. And there's probably, Mike Stothers, former coach in Ontario, loved to give me a hard time, but there's probably never been a coach that's given me a more difficult time, all out of love, pure love, than Jason Christie. Just a wonderful guy, and we certainly miss Smurf out with the Ontario Reign.
Before I let you go, John, tripling back to the pronunciation debate, I know you'll remember number 13, Robert Long, who then was traded and then changed the pronunciation of his name to Robert Lang.
Yes,
and then
Lang, Long.
Yeah, then changed it back a few times. So, I mean, if we can't figure out how to pronounce Lang, what chance is there to reach any sort of consensus on a name with a letter that doesn't exist in the English language?
I love guys that change their names. It reminds me of Doug/Douglas Murray, of course, with the San Jose Sharks. So, I don't know. I think you're right, though, Jesse. It's 4 letters. If we can't get the pronunciation of that right, I think that we need to send a message to all hockey agents and to all hockey GMs. Before you sign a player, it should be like the first line of the contract. Please write out the pronunciation of your name. These guys are now putting in there all sorts of different clauses, right? They get their jersey number is known in advance before they sign a deal. At the very least, can they just tell us the correct pronunciation so we don't call a guy by one name and then 4 years later he decides to tell us, yeah, I'm not Doug, I'm Douglas. Okay, well, sorry, you're Doug in my mind because it's already, it's been there.
Hockey players are some of the nicest people ever too, and they'll never correct anyone. So
you're absolutely right, Paul. That's what it is.
People that go through years and years of their career being like, actually, well, nobody asked me, but it's this.
Except, of course, Dave Joseph has his famous story about being corrected on a name. I won't name the player in case Dave would prefer it not get out there, but I know, John, you know what I'm talking about.
DJ has some great stories.
One final thing before we go, and I don't know why this popped into my head, but you and I disagree on a ton of stuff, but one thing we absolutely do agree on is, never mind the pronunciation, when a player is in a team system and is playing on the minor league affiliate, you can't wear a number of a star player on the parent club, right?
Well, you're close. My beef with it is this: you can't wear a number from a player on the big club if you are a legit NHL prospect.
Yes, that's
right?
You're
so,
right.
I mean, if you're a guy who's gonna, that's a fine career, that's a fine profession, but you don't have an NHL contract, you're not going to be called up anytime soon, then whatever number you pick is fine. But
right.
Man, it is very confusing, and I don't understand why it needs to be this confusing, right? Yeah. Nobody in Ontario that is a legit prospect should be wearing number 8, 11, or 23.
Exactly.
Those numbers are taken.
Or 32. Yeah.
And and Jesse, this all sort of circles back to, there's a huge feud that is brewing among the LA Kings prospects. You have Cale Clegg, and you also have Arthur Kaliev, who are angling for perhaps the same number. Yep. So, Clegg, he's hoping that he hurries up and gets to the NHL. Meanwhile, Kaliev's hoping he has an impressive World Juniors, and he can, to borrow your phrase, he can dine off of that at the NHL level. I don't know. I think we need to do a webcast and, forget all this stuff about Evander Kane boxing one of the Paul brothers. Let's get Cale Clegg going at it with Kaliev, and we can just duke this out once and for all and see who gets the number.
Well, I don't want anybody getting hurt, but maybe they can thumb wrestle for it or something. There we go. All right, John, we're going to let you go. We appreciate you coming in. Carlin, anything left for the mayor before we see him off?
I know you haven't been to a live show in months and months and months, but are you listening to any new music lately that we should check out, Mr. Music Guy?
You know, new music is really hard to come by right now, but I did take in the Face-to-Face Triple Crown over the weekend, and boy, that was fantastic to see those guys with 3 shows from South Bay Customs. Bad Religion coming up with they're going to play 4 different sets from the Roxy. That's great. But if you're looking for new music, it's an old band that broke up for about 10 years and got back together. They're an LA rock band. They're called The Binges, and they put out one of the best CDs from any LA band about 10 years ago. They recently have gotten back together, put out a couple of new songs, but check out The Binges. That would be my hot tip, Carl.
Let's go. All right. It's on my list. The Binges. I'm going to binge it.
John, do you remember 8 years ago we had you on, you, me, and the Royal Half, and we broke down all the songs written for teams by not celebrity bands, but by bands.
Yeah, Pantera, of course, probably the most famous of all, with the Dallas Stars theme. Yes, and our old buddy Fred Coury doing music for Los Angeles as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Since then, of course, we've had Vegas. I haven't been able to find a Vegas song, but we'll have to have you on and revisit that topic sometime soon. For now, though, we appreciate you coming on, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts on the World Junior Championship.
Sounds good. Take care, Carl. Good seeing you. Talk to you later, Jeff.